When my daughter Leah was 1, we invited all our family to come to church with us. Leah was being dedicated, and that's something we do in our tradition it's a bit like being christened. We also had a birthday party for her afterwards. And I remember a conversation we had with my sister-in-law. She said something like, "I don't believe in this, but I want this." You see, she didn't believe what we believed about who Jesus is. She didn't share our faith, but she did want to share our experience. And this she was talking about, it wasn't the service she just attended, it wasn't the building she was standing in, it was the community that she saw we were part of. My family had witnessed firsthand the love and support that Louise and I received throughout our married life. They witnessed how people helped us get set up in a new home, giving us the things that we didn't have or we couldn't afford. They witnessed how our church family rallied around us when Leah was born 10 weeks early, how they cared for us and organised lifts to take Louise to the hospital so she could be with Leah whilst I was at work. It was this that my sister-in-law realised was missing in her life. It was this sense of community, this sense of belonging, this family that she craved. And perhaps you long to be part of something like this too. We all need to belong. We all need a place that we can call home. Now, this is part 3 of a 4-part series called Significant. It's all about what it means to be part of the church. And the big idea for this series is that being part of the church requires us to be willing to be part of something significant instead of just wanting to be a significant part of something. The church, throughout its history, has had a significant impact on the world. The world is completely different in a good way because of the positive impact that the church has had. And of course, there are a bunch of things, some horrific things that the church has done. You know, people have done things in the name of Jesus that has nothing to do with Jesus. Just like any movement. You know, there have been people who have tried to use it to further their own gain and their own agenda. However, nobody can deny the immense positive impact that the church, that the followers of Jesus have had on the world and continue to have. And throughout this series, we've seen that Jesus instigated his church to be a people that carry on what he started. And the Greek word he used to describe the church was ekklesia. It literally means to be called out. And it describes a gathering of people who gather for a purpose. And somewhere along the line, we adopted the word church. It comes from the German word Kirche, which describes a public building. You see, Jesus created the church to be a movement that will bring hope and healing to the world. A movement that would demonstrate and declare good news to a world that is drowning in despair. But unfortunately, somewhere along the line, we allowed ourselves to drift away from being a movement to being a building, or perhaps a service we attend. And on our good days, we recognise that the church isn't the building, that it's the people. But that's not totally correct either. The church isn't the building and it isn't the people. The church, the ekklesia, is the gathered community of Jesus followers who gather for a purpose. It's the purpose and the people. And so today we're going to focus on the people who are part of this movement. The people who get to be part of the ekklesia, the church. And if you tracked along with this series, you will know that a guy called Paul described the church as a body. See, Paul set up lots of churches across the world, and he wrote letters to encourage them, instruct them, and to challenge them. And these letters form part of the New Testament section in the Bible. And Paul says the church is like a body. He literally describes us as each being a body part. And the point is that a body needs different parts to function. If it was just a big foot or a load of feet, it wouldn't be a body. So what part of the body are you? This is where we realise that we want to be a good part. We want to be a hand or an eye. We don't want to be an armpit or the tonsils. And when we start to think like this, we miss the point of what Paul is saying. When we focus on the part we play in the body, rather than being part of the body, we begin to focus on wanting to be a significant part of something, rather than part of something significant. Paul's point isn't about what part of the body you are. It's simply that you are part of it. And for the body to function and thrive, it needs all of us to bring our unique gifts, our talents, and our personalities and harness them together to help the body do what it was created to do. There's an old saying, you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. Now, this applies to church too. We all have a tendency of surrounding ourselves with people who are like us. And there's another saying, opposites attract. It's true of magnets, but it's not true of people. We gravitate to the people who are like us. We like the people who are like us. Generally speaking, we choose to be in a relationship with someone who has something in common with us. There's something about them that is like us. That's why we like them. Now, how does this dynamic work when it comes to being part of the church? How does it work when you're part of the body with other parts who are nothing like you? The beauty of the church is found in its diversity. Where else on earth do you find such a diverse community pulling together? Now, my kids have grown up into a community of people, many of whom are completely different to them, many of whom would never come into close contact with them if it wasn't for them being part of this body. Now, I'm not talking about what we do on a Sunday. I'm talking about the community that is the church. Being in the same room as people doesn't create community. We do that all the time when we go to the cinema or we travel on a train or a plane. I bet you don't even know the name of the person that you sat next to on your last long haul flight, even though you breathed the same air and fought over the armrest for the duration of the 10-hour flight. This isn't about proximity, but it is about presence. It's a beautiful thing when the church functions in this way, but it isn't easy or straightforward. We often acknowledge that the gravitational pull of the church, like any people group, is inwards. Left to ourselves, we automatically and almost instinctively drift inwards. We close ranks and we ignore the people who are not part of our family. However, the gravitational pull of the church, like any people group, isn't just inward, it's also to the people who are like us. Now, one of the first challenges that the early church faced was including people who weren't like them. It was people who were different, who had different values and different cultures. People who not only looked different, but who also acted differently. When the church started, it was completely made up of people who'd grown up in the Jewish tradition. But as the church grew, it started to include people who weren't Jewish. Now, that was the plan all along. The biblical word for somebody who isn't Jewish is Gentile. Now, this was a big deal for the early church. Welcoming and including Gentiles was not easy. They didn't believe or behave in a way that was consistent with the Jewish traditions. And a big issue was the whole area of circumcision. And if you're not sure what circumcision is, well, let's just say it's an operation performed on Jewish boys when they're born. And it might not be the nicest experience for a baby. It certainly isn't something you'd want to go through as an adult. When the first Gentiles were being adopted into the life of the church, they were also expected to adopt the principles and practices of the Jewish tradition. Things like staying ceremonially clean, not eating certain foods, and if you were a man, having a little bit of your body chopped off. And I'm sure it wouldn't surprise you to know that they didn't respond well to this. It sparked a huge debate. And it wasn't just expecting the Gentiles to be like the Jews. It was also Jews spending time with the Gentiles. It was against their Jewish law and their customs for a Jewish person to associate with a Gentile. And cutting a long story short, no pun intended, the leaders of the early church gathered in Jerusalem to debate the issue. And they realized that many of their Jewish customs were not necessary in this new movement that Jesus had instigated. They were unnecessary obstacles to put in the way of non-Jewish people finding faith and becoming part of the body of the church. And in the middle of this whole debate, James, that's the brother of Jesus, stood up and said, "It's my judgment that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God." James realized that they should remove any unnecessary obstacles that stood in the way of people finding Jesus and following him. Now, this is a big deal for us at FBC. This value underpins so much of what we do and who we are. We actively and we intentionally seek to identify and remove any unnecessary obstacle that stands in the way of people finding faith. The message of the gospel, who Jesus is, what Jesus has done, and what it means to follow him might be an obstacle for some. That's a necessary obstacle. But there's a whole load of things that we do that are part of our customs and our traditions that are unnecessary. They're not something Jesus has told us we have to do or even should do. So we do all we can do to spot what they are and remove them. That's why we do some of the things we do, and it's why we don't do some of the things that other churches might do. It's really difficult for us to appreciate how massive this was. The church would not have spread across the world if they didn't come to this realization. The church would have stayed put in Judea and been limited to just a sect of Judaism. This was massive for the church and the entire world, but it was massive for the Jewish Christians too. This was not easy for them. It was a huge obstacle for them to overcome. Because the gravitational pull of any people group is inward. It's to the people who are like us, and it's away from the people who are not like us. Now, later on, Paul writes this to the church in Galatia. There is neither Jew nor Gentile. There's neither slave nor free, nor is there male and female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. Now, throughout the history of the human race, there's been division and separation. Them and us, in and out, male and female, black and white, rich and poor, leave and remain, red and blue, gay and straight, north and south, young and old. We've 100 ways to divide and separate. It was true then, just as it is true now. In the midst of this divisive culture, Paul proclaims that these divisions do not exist in Jesus. Now, Paul isn't saying that we're all the same. He isn't taking away the diversity. He's just showing the equality and the unity that we find in Jesus and in being part of his body, his family, his church. Now, Paul reminded them of this truth because they needed to be reminded of it. That's because the gravitational pull of any people group is inward. It's to the people who are like them, the people who look like them and behave like them. You know what? I think we need reminding about this too. We all have this thing called unconscious bias. Often we don't realise it. That's why it's called unconscious bias. We make judgments or assumptions about people based on this bias. We form opinions and we include or we exclude based on it. The issue isn't removing this bias, it's about being aware of it so we don't allow it to influence or control our decisions and our actions. So where do you think you allow your unconscious bias to stand in the way of who should and who shouldn't be allowed to be part of the church? You don't have to be part of the church to have this opinion. You might inwardly think that to be part of the church means you have to be religious or good. You might exclude yourself from being part of the family of the church because you don't fit this inward bias or this assumption that you've made. If you're part of this family, what are the subconscious divisions that you put in place that says who can and who can't be in or out? Who should be on the inside and who should be on the outside? Our gravitational pull is to people who are like us. And left to ourselves, we gather together with people who are like us. But Jesus was radically and scandalously different to this. He spent time with people who were not like him. He included people who were not like him. The people who were nothing like Jesus liked Jesus, and he liked them back. He got into trouble for who he included, for who he spent time with. Just flick through the pages of the Gospels, that's Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, and take a look at who Jesus spent time with and what the people around him thought about it. He welcomes, he includes, he accepts, and he invites a diverse group of people to be part of his tribe, often without putting any barriers, any conditions, or any expectations in place. This was a value that he instilled in his body, in his church. The radical and scandalous nature of the early church was found in who they included, not who they excluded. The church is a body, it's a family, it's a diverse family. In Jesus, we discover a unity and equality that isn't found anywhere else. This unity isn't about uniformity. It's not about being the same. It certainly isn't about looking the same. Often, it's not about behaving the same or completely sharing the same values. But it is about allowing our unique selves to be part of something bigger and affording the same benefit to others. To be part of the family of the church is to be part of this rich tapestry where everyone gets the chance to play. In fact, it's about doing all we can to help people become part of this family, to remove any unnecessary obstacles that stand in the way of people finding faith in Jesus. And if you're wondering what a necessary obstacle is, well, there's only one. It's Jesus himself. Who's in and who isn't is not up to us. That's above our pay grade. It's beyond our responsibility. We're simply called to be part of this family, to be part of something significant, and to do all we can to help others do the same. And if you're wondering what the so what is from this message, well, it's exactly that. Jesus invites you to be part of his body, to be part of his family, his unique, his diverse, disruptive, and often messy family. So if you're part of it, be part of it. Be present, be connected, be active in the lives of the people who are part of this family with you. And if you're part of it, do all you can to help others be part of it too. Identify the unnecessary obstacles that we put in the way of people finding faith and remove them. That's not easy. And this next bit is even more challenging. Identify the inward obstacles and barriers that you put in the way of people being part of this family. Perhaps it's the people who don't look like you, who are not the same age as you. It might be the people who don't behave like you or have the same values as you do. Allow yourself to become aware of the barriers you put in place to keep people out, the walls you build to separate and divide, and then start to dismantle them brick by brick.